I've heard this story told by other parents too, but I've heard my own parents tell it. When I was a kid, when I was little, and I was moving from sleeping in a crib to sleeping in a bed, one of the things that I guess just didn't occur to me over the course of that transition was the fact that I was in a bed meant I didn't have to stay in the crib when I woke up, and that I could independently get out of the crib. So when I would wake up as a little kid, I would just yell for my parents, like, "Mom, come and get me." And they would come and they would kindly get me out of the bed, despite the fact that, I was big enough to just get out of the bed on my own. It's an interesting thing that happens where kids trust a process and they trust the people at the other end of that process, and they're willing to just say, "All right, let's make this happen," over and over. And we actually kind of teach kids to trust that kind of a process. We teach each other to trust those kinds of processes. We do it systematically from the government to people. We do it within families, from parent to children. We do it in work or in our jobs, from boss to employee. Go ahead and follow this path, and it's going to take you where you want to go, and the people who accompany you along the way are going to be ones that you can trust and know are going to care about you. So when Jesus talks about children, and he talks about this idea of children having faith, children having trust, he tends to talk about what they trust. He tends to be making implications about what it is they're looking to, or who it is that they're trusting, right? That they're looking to a parent or they're looking to a father. But it's also true that they trust for something, right? There's something that they're looking for, something that they're wanting along the way that they're hoping the father is going to provide. Why do kids do this? Why is it that it's such a part of the heart to need to look to something and trust it? And then why would Jesus say that that's actually the better way, that this looking to something else, trusting that it has what's best for you, and then reaching out for it is superior to being able to reach out on your own and get what you want and make it happen? Because everything around us, everything about the lives that we lead, everything about the world that we live in suggests the opposite. What's better, what's more powerful, is the way where you independently do what it takes to get the thing that you want, so that you don't have to be reliant or dependent on anyone else. And I don't know why exactly we believe that. Maybe in part it's because we think, well, we just can't trust anyone else, right? Like at the end of the day, you're on your own and you got to make it happen. Maybe part of it is that we've been burned in the past and it just hurts too much to go through that again. And so we say it's just easier, it's just better, it's just smarter to not put your heart in that kind of a situation. Maybe in one way or another, it's that we don't want that to happen to us. We don't want somebody to trust us, whether it's because we don't think we can do it. We have that sort of imposter feeling or that imposter syndrome where, well, if someone was going to trust me, I'd have all this pressure, I'd have to deliver. I'd rather just not be in that kind of situation because I don't think I'm worthy of it. Or we're lazy. We don't want to be put in that position where someone is reaching out for us in trust. At the end of the day, I'm not exactly sure why it is that we're saying independence is superior, dependence is worse, but we say it and we do it and we think it all the time. And in the practical day-to-day of life, I kind of get it. Like, no one else is gonna probably pour your breakfast cereal or make your bacon or brew your coffee. You are going to have to do that. There's not somebody else that you can look to and depend for it. At least that's what we tend to think. But you think about those processes, the pouring of the cereal, the making of the bacon, the brewing of the coffee. There's a lot of people involved in those. Obviously, in the morning, it's you who has to do it, but all the way from the field to the warehouse to the store, there's a lot of people involved in that. And if you go back even further than the field, God is intrinsic to these processes as well. And it's easy, because the devil's a liar and he wants you to start thinking that the things you do independently, the things that you accomplish, the things that you manage are things that you are doing independently, that you accomplish, that you are managing. But it's a lie. It's a lie that simply denies a whole million, billion unseen things happening around you all the time, things on which you are entirely dependent, like a child is dependent on a parent for 10 million things in a given day that they don't realize. And in missing that, you're missing something much bigger. You're not just missing the opportunity to acknowledge your own weakness or your own inadequacy, which I can understand why someone would want to skip that. What you're missing is the chance to acknowledge the infinite amounts of love that are poured into every step of those million billion things that you don't always acknowledge and see. And to let that love in, to feel yourself be loved as you pour your cereal, be loved as you cook up some bacon, be loved as you brew and sip on a coffee. You, in so many more ways than you can possibly enumerate today, are incredibly loved by God. A child seems to understand that better because of their vulnerability, because of their inadequacy, because frankly they're just like short and they can't reach things and they aren't educated, so they can't figure things out, and they don't have what it takes to do enough to become idols for themselves. A child seems to have this ability, this innate sense of need to be cared for and be loved. Really leaning into that need. It's a good thing. It's a human thing. And I mean human in the way that God designed a human to be a human kind of way. The most important thing, though, about this whole process is that when we don't have the discipline or take the time to think the way that a child thinks, when we take the shortcuts that involve just thinking we're doing it on our own instead of acknowledging how much love God is enabling to happen around us, how many ways He is arranging things to give you everything you touch, everything you see, everything that's in front of you. When we skip that, when we take the shortcut, we are missing the chance not just to acknowledge the good things that are happening and see ourselves as part of a bigger system, not just to see God's love as it comes in on a regular basis, but over time, as we repeatedly skip that, over time, as we repeatedly ignore the goodness, we get really weak in this one muscle. There's an atrophy that starts to set in the muscle that is confidence in God's love, confidence in God's desire to have what's best for you and be there for you. You know, for Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden before the fall into sin, they had the utmost confidence that God cared about them and loved them and wanted what was best for them. It really didn't matter what was going to happen around them. Like, a storm could theoretically have happened in the Garden of Eden. Some fruit could have fallen, trees could have fallen. Adam and Eve would have had no question in their minds that God loved and cared for them in the midst of that difficult moment. But as soon as they decided to reach out on their own and take something for themselves, instead of remaining in that loving, dependent relationship with God that He had described to them as being good, that He had shown them would be enough to satisfy them, as soon as they reached out to take that muscle of dependence, of trust, of letting God's love in, it started to atrophy. It started to get weaker, and they started to not be as able to receive the love that God has for them as they were before. And over time, over generations, we've gotten, it feels to me, worse and worse and worse at receiving, worse at being able to identify and then enjoy and then really depend on, like not in one moment, but in all the moments together. Trust that God is going to be there for us, that He has what's best for us. And as a result, when bad things happen, when difficult things happen, when things that God doesn't want and we don't want come to pass, that muscle doesn't flex hard enough, and we start to think, well, maybe God doesn't want what's best for us. Maybe God doesn't care about me. Maybe God's not really here for me. We start instead to believe this lie of the devil, that the God who we know loves us because He says He loves us, but more importantly, because He does loving things for us, like give up His own Son for us in our place. We believe the devil's lie that God doesn't really have our best interests at heart. When a child starts to think that their parents aren't there, when they call out in the middle of the night and the parents are sleeping too hard and they don't hear, so they don't come, or when they realize they've wandered too far in a store or in a park and they're not exactly sure where their parent is, there's an awful version of panic that sets in. It's not productive. This whole series we've had this image of a hand reaching up out of the water. And the implication of that hand reaching up out of the water is someone needs help, right? Someone is drowning. Someone is in a situation where they're not going to make it if someone doesn't come and help them. And a really crazy thing about drowning that we talked about earlier is that you're unproductive, you're counterproductive when you're drowning. You actually push away help. You don't do the basic things that you should do, like swim with your arms and legs. Instead, all you're focused on is getting a chance to breathe one more gulp of air. And when that kind of desperation sets in and you stop thinking about what it takes to go forward and only think about getting through this exact moment, it's really only the last 90 to 60 seconds of drowning wherein that process, that panic that stops you from being able to move or listen or yell, sets in. When a child starts to think that their parent isn't there, when a drowning person starts to think this is it, when you start to think maybe God doesn't really love me, there's a panic that sets in and it's the opposite of security. It is the opposite of any kind of sense that it's gonna be okay. It's the worst. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but that's where God is yelling the loudest, where he's striving the hardest. And as we established in this series, where God himself has chosen to be the one who drowns in your place, so that even after you've had those questions, even after those moments of panic, even after those moments of not really trusting that God has for you what he promises he has for you, he says to you, it's going to be okay, because I've been there and I'm going to bring you up out of it. He says to you, it's going to be okay because I made sure that even when you feel insecure, my love is securely locked on you. I am here for you and with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. That when you realize what's going on and you're left with no strength to reach out and grab what you think you can get on your own, then my love is there, knocking at the door, ready to come in. This On Letting Love In series, hopefully for you, has been a chance to realize that reaching out and making love happen, that trying to force God's love isn't only impossible, it's illogical, because God is here and he is loving you like a parent is there and loving their child. It's what they do. And so yours is just to reach up and to say, come and get me, come and help me. I need you to be with me, not just in those moments when you really know you can't do it yourself, but especially also in those moments when you think you can, to be saying, I don't want to do this without you. I'm not interested in making this happen without acknowledging my dependence on you, because acknowledging my dependence on you is the same thing as acknowledging your love for me. May God instill this in you at the soul level. May he give you every opportunity to realize how much love he's pouring out for you. And may his Spirit fill you up so that you can enjoy it, so that you can find the happiness in being loved in this way.